So sorry for the short disruption. I had some issues with the graphics card and sending the signal out in the wrong way. I will start up the Citrix VMware RDS in the world of IGEL OS session. I will do the Citrix part, and afterwards a friend and a colleague, Sebastian Perosat, will join on the stage and do the VMware and Microsoft presentation part. But start with, we announced an ICE test. This test is going to happen. Of course, it's not mandatory. If you don't want to do the test, then don't do the test. But anyways, the plan was from the beginning to have this test with the whole group on site. But we were counting on, we weren't counting on really getting 150 persons. So that's why this test will have to be delayed, at latest by the end of the month, hopefully already during next week. You will have sent an email with a link to your registered email address where you can do the test. There are a few in the audience that actually didn't register before. I would like you to talk to your either pre-sales colleagues or sales relations, just so that we can actually reach you with this link. So provide the contact information for us. So let's start it all up. We start with the Citrix stuff. We are saying that we have over 7,000 different possibilities when configuring thin clients. That might seem a little bit too much. A little bit too much thing to actually know about, understand, know every setting. You don't. You definitely do not need to know everything. So to get a minimal configuration of a Citrix receiver to get connected to your storefront servers in the backend, you need to first create a desktop. You already seen the UMS presentation from Torsten. He showed you how to do the profiles and whatever. Good job, Torsten. So I will not explain the profile building part. But you will have to create the icon on the desktop. It's actually not enabled by default. So you need to create this just by adding the checkbox to desktop or wherever you want to have the icon. Number two, you need to specify where your storefront server is. You need to know the fully qualified domain name of the storefront, and you need to know the path on the storefront web services, the path to the store. Let's see if, sorry. You see where I am now? This FQDN address of the storefront and the path. In general, the path is Citrix/store. But it might be something else if you created your own stores and whatever. And you also need to enter the store name. I think actually it's not a dependency, but makes sense anyways. When you try the connection you just created, almost every customer will end up in seeing this error message. Have you installed your root certificate? This is due to that most internal environments are based on internal PKIs. So you have a root CA internally which issues certificates to intermediate servers, which allows signing to your resources. So to be able to connect to receiver, Citrix has done a big job on securing the receiver and the communication. So you will need to trust the certificate that your backend environment is using. If you're using a public third-party certificate, this issue generally will never be seen. So in this case, you just need to retrieve the certificate from your PKI administrators. If you luckily are the one that are administrating the PKI, you will easily know where to find the certificate. Otherwise, there is a few different options on how to actually retrieve those certificates. You can easily do it through Internet Explorer, for instance. You could even do it locally on the IGEL device. I will not show this, but this is what you will end up with, and you will need to install the certificate. That was the easy minimal configuration. In Citrix, we have quite a few different connection possibilities to Citrix environments. I will show you 7 different examples. There is more, of course. But anyways, let's look at the different options. We have the Citrix receiver, which is the native application running on the IGEL device, pre-built from Citrix, implemented in our firmware and operating system. We have the receiver for web. It's the web version of the storefront. You connect to the receiver for web website and enter your credentials. We are using Firefox in our devices. So you just create a browser session and enter the storefront address. We have the mode self-service, which is kind of using the receiver, but it will wrap the icons in a window, which is quite good looking. For old Citrix environments, pre-Zen Desktop 7, pre-storefront actually, we have the possibility to do legacy ICA sessions. Just point out the XML brokers of the Citrix Synapse 6.5 form, for instance. And of course, specify which desktop that is load balanced and so on. We have also the possibility to use appliance mode. Appliance mode is a way to very easy, make it very easy for the users. I should say you can do it as easy with the different versions of receiver connection options, but it's a very easy way to connect to a Citrix environment. I will show you those. And finally, we have the Active Directory authentication passed through to receiver. Maybe you want to know which user is actually logged into a device. So you can tell the device that the user needs to enter credentials. The credentials will be validated at the Active Directory. You will not join the device to the domain. You will just log on to the domain. And then you will get a ticket, and you can, of course, insert this ticket in the receiver authentication and get the session passed through logged in. So let's look at some of the examples. I will need to switch between the presenter mode and the backends. Can we see this? Yeah, it's good enough. Sorry. So this is a receiver launched and just asking for credentials. The user will enter the username and the password. Of course, you see that it's pre-specified the username. It's pre-specified the domain. You do not need to do this. You can clear this out. If you have roaming users, this is what you should do. But anyways, to make it easy and simple for me, I keep the old login user. I type the password, which is highly secure. And hopefully, as I needed to reboot my machine and pause all the virtual machines and whatever, everything might fail. But it seems to work. With the receiver, you will get published all the published applications and desktop that this specific user has access to will be shown as an icon on the desktop. That's a default way of showing the icons. We'll continue talking about that later. I will not do the actual connections all the time because then we'll spend a lot of time looking at login scripts and whatever. So logging off again. I will now move this device from the receiver to the receiver for web configuration. This might seem to be quite basic knowledge, but there is a lot of customers out there that do not understand that there is different ways to actually connect to the Citrix environment to suit the needs of the users. I personally prefer the receiver one, but there are so many others preferring other stuff. So I will just move the device, make the change to take effect immediately. So all of a sudden I have a browser icon. Magic of UMS, right? Launching the browser. It takes me to the receiver for web page. I will step back one step, actually. The receiver, I was talking about that you will see SSL errors, SSL error if you do not install the certificate of your PKI environment in the device. Receiver 13 and upwards from Citrix in Linux do not support HTTP connection. So it requires SSL. So there is no option to actually, to select HTTP. But if there is a requirement from the customer, this might be the way to do it. Because receiver for web can launch the HTTPS connection, HTTP connection to the storefront for the receiver for web. And from there you can launch the session without SSL. So it's the storefront connection that requires SSL. You can also do this in different ways, putting a netscaler in front, do HTTPS towards the netscaler and let the netscaler translate to HTTP. There's a lot of acronyms. So let's see if I can hit a backspace. I think I can't actually when doing this remoting. What happens? Yeah, anyways, it will bring you to the website where you see all the published applications. Let's drag the device and do the self-service configuration. Applying the settings on the device. I change the icon more or less. That's the only thing I do. But I also in the backend reconfigure the device to use self-service instead. Which kind of looks like a receiver for web, but it's actually not. So now my receiver is asking me, my self-service login is asking me to insert my smart card. I haven't configured smart card, but the storefront in the backend are supporting smart card. So that's why I get this. If you want to have a username password login, but you also want to have smart card login, but not for IGEL devices or whatever it might be, then you need to set up separate stores. So I will log in using another method, and username and password, too many letters. And the storefront published applications will show up on the login screen. Not so much magic, it just works. Going on to the legacy session. I do not have the server running in the back end, but this will actually do a direct connection to one specific Citrix server. You can also, of course, add load-balanced XML-based connections, but of course before pre-storefront. Continuing further down, we want to see how the appliance mode looks. It will take a few seconds to actually reload the GUI because we are securing the terminal in terms of what the user can do with the terminal. In this setup, they will actually only be able to enter the credentials, more or less, which in some cases are really good, in some cases doesn't fulfill the requirements. Anyways, pressing Ctrl-Alt-Delete will bring you to the storefront to receive a web login. As I still cannot type the backslash, I will not show the login. Continuing for the appliance mode of self-service. Will take a few seconds. I like the appliance mode. I honestly do, but it doesn't fulfill, in my opinion, it doesn't fulfill all use cases, because you might need to be able to change the resolution of a monitor. The user should have the possibility to do that. It's possible using appliance mode, but it's tough for the user to hit whatever it might be, Control-Alternate F2 to launch the setup and then change the monitor settings. Yeah. It's better ways to do this. And there is better ways to do this. So we are at the self-service appliance mode. I will log in just to show you the same icons again. Perfect, it works. We also have an Active Directory authentication, which passes through the credential to the device. There are some stuff happening in the backend here that you will not. I will explain it later what actually is going on. As I said, it takes a few seconds because we are changing the mode of the operating system. So to apply the different settings. So I will now log into the Active Directory locally on the device, and hopefully I will also be launching a session. Seems to be working. What I did now was that I logged in to Active Directory on the device. The benefit is that you will have logs in your Active Directory stating which user is using which device. Yeah, whatever. It's due to the pausing of the backend system, so let's leave it there. Oh, sorry. There are different authentication methods. Citrix Receiver has its own authentication method, and IGEL has created a separate authentication method, which gives you some benefits and some disadvantages. So the main difference between the two mechanisms is at the IGEL authentication mechanism, you can predefine username and passwords. Let's say for a factory, devices in the factory should only be powered on showing something, some production system. So then you can use predefined credentials to get this device. As soon as it gets power, it will boot up, it will log into the Citrix session, it will launch the application or whatever it might be. If you're using the Citrix authentication mechanism, this is not possible. You can script this, of course, but the other thing that you need to do, if you have what is called two-factor authentication using one-time password pins or whatever it might be, then you need to use the Citrix authentication mechanism because we have not implemented that one in our own authentication. So continuing with receiver by itself. In the IGEL operating system, we tend to always implement more than one receiver due to there are, really new receivers might have some bugs that needs to be fixed. Really old receivers might not have the requirements that you have for your state-of-the-art, up-to-date Citrix environments. But there is also customers that wants to run the latest firmwares, but have really old Citrix environments. So, for instance, if you have a really old presentation 4.5 environment, you shouldn't go for the newest receiver. You should go for a as old as possible receiver. And of course, if you want to use the gaming stuff that are on display on the second floor, you need to select a bit more mature receiver. So let's walk through the options when configuring a Citrix session. Oh, sorry. I'll just open up a profile. We can see this, right? So session Citrix desktop setup. This is where you do the configuration of the Citrix environment, Citrix connection for the device. First of all, we have the receiver selection, like we saw in the presentation. We have the possibility to choose here. What is really, really important to know is that if you specify a specific version of receiver, say we specify 13.3.2, and you push that settings to all your IGEL devices. And then after a half year, you upgrade the firmware of all your devices, where this firmware actually do not have the 13.3.2 version of receiver installed. This firmware will select the default receiver instead when launching the Citrix session. So all of a sudden, you have your users connecting to your really, really old Citrix environment. Everything is working perfectly fine. Then you upgrade the firmware, but you do not take care about the receiver version. The user starts complaining that they have, for instance, distorted text inputs, text fields in the sessions. This might definitely be the reason. Continuing with the HDX ICA Global options. I will not mention server location because it's old stuff. We have the possibility to do some alter the settings of how to do the login. If we want to use a local login mode, a login window, or specify domains or whatever it might be. I think I will not walk through all of these because it will take too much time. But anyways, this is a really important thing. Let's go for if you have a multi-monitor setup and you configure the device to actually have dual monitors, perfect. The IGEL operating system boots up and you can drag the mouse over to the second monitor, as you're supposed to be able to do. But you launch the Citrix session and it sticks only to one monitor. Why? This happens because the default setting is Restrict full screen sessions to one monitor. So to enable multi-monitor, you have the possibility to expand multi-screen sessions across all monitors. Quite a few persons miss this, actually. Continuing to the mapping session, which might be really interesting. For example, for healthcare, if you're using dictation, you should accelerate the dictation by enabling features on the client side. We do implement very many functions for dictations and support the biggest, largest manufacturers of dictation software and hardware. So let's say our backend system is using a dictation system that is based on Philips hardware and Nuance speech acceleration. Then, of course, you need to enable the Nuance and you need to enable the Philips functions. This will accelerate the dictation and make everything work much more smoother. I will not go through the legacy ICA sessions. I will more just show the different options for storefront web interface. This is a quite important thing. When you modify the settings, set up the settings for the storefront, you will have to select the type of storefront you have. So, of course, defaults, I think it defaults to storefront, it should at least. But we have the possibility to use web interface services and the storefront legacy mode. We also have the possibility to here predefine login credentials. But at the same time, as I told you before, there are different authentication mechanisms. So in the login section, you have the authentication type, which by default is password authentication. But I have the possibility to choose Kerberos authentication for web interface functions. Smart card authentication, this is also using IGEL authentication mechanism. But we can also select the two different Citrix authentication mechanisms where you have smart card enabled or smart card disabled, if you're using smart card or not. That's about it for now, actually. So anyways, while I was browsing through this, you saw that there was quite a few different options. As you see, we also have, within the registry of an IGEL device, if you look at system, when you build a profile system registry, we have quite a few different options there too. I don't know how many, but very many. Where we can alter functions within the WF clients.ini file using a profile, but it's not shown in the GUI, it's just shown in the registry, because it would be too much to show in the profile building. It's more of giving you an idea that this actually exists. We can actually do even more configuration. There are files within the receiver that we do not touch using the UMS profiles, like the policy file or regions.ini, for instance. We have chosen to disable the function desktop viewer toolbar that was introduced quite a few years ago from Citrix. A small menu in the top of the window where you can windowize or disconnect or whatever you want to do. So as an example, to enable the desktop viewer toolbar, you have the possibility to use custom commands. And custom commands will actually trigger stuff to happen during the device is booting. So the example here will set the final desktop command when the device has booted and is ready. It will apply the SED command, which replaces or actually removes the, this sign from the file to enable the desktop viewer toolbar. Might be good to know. It might be difficult to find, but this is a way to do it. We have actually posted this on the Slack channel in the IGEL community, which you will hear about later on. This is a perfect place for getting all this information. So I encourage you all to join this Slack community. So if we had NetScalers, persons might need to configure devices to connect over the internet. It might be a good idea to use a NetScaler for security reasons and for the reverse proxy functions. What many customers are doing are initially are that they are entering the fully qualified domain name of the NetScaler, and then they add the path to the store. We do not need that. It's the NetScaler's job to provide this to the device. And also the store name is also up to the NetScaler. Adding on to that, you saw that when I logged into the receiver, I was able to, I was presented with all my published applications. But there might be reason to remove those applications. In my opinion, the Citrix admins are the ones that should limit functionality for the user, because they are presenting the content. But there might be reasons, I mean, you might have IGEL devices on your on-premise network, and you also have devices connecting through the external interface using the ICG for management. Then you can add a filter for all devices connecting through the ICG. You could add a filter that only shows the non-sensitive enabled application or whatever it might be. And we can also do, sorry, I'm switching the order. And we can also do application auto-launch. Maybe you saw when I did the Active Directory authentication, I logged in, and receiver started automatically, and I was signed in, and the desktop was kicked automatically. There is also possibilities, so you add a list of applications you want to launch for the user. I have a use case actually where a customer was using a mix of 6.5 and CNDesktop environments. They were in a transition phase, but they couldn't transition all users at the same time, but they wanted to have all the IGEL devices to have the same configuration. So they specified one desktop on the Synapse 6.5 environment and one desktop on the 7 environment, and set the auto launch to include both desktops. So what happens when the user logs into the storefront, they get presented with either a Synapse 6.5 environment desktop or the 7, whatever it might be, desktop, and it will try to auto launch both of those. It will not give you an error if the desktop isn't available. It will just, it doesn't care about it, so it will launch the second desktop instead. It's a nice feature. We'll not look at this. We don't have the time. Sorry. We did see it before. So, in terms of HDX, we have the possibility to redirect Windows Media processing. So when you watch a video within the Citrix session, instead of playing the video on server side, you can easily, instead of playing on server side, redirect it to the client to have the device to actually render the video, which might give a smoother experience for the user. It requires a multimedia multimedia codec pack. We do support in Citrix HTML5 redirection. In my opinion, it's still experimental. I think you still do need to do internal sites, as you need to have a header in the HTML5 configuration. into HTML5 video. The death of flash redirection. We are using a 64-bit operating system. We only implement 64-bit versions of our software, and Citrix actually do not support flash redirection on 64-bit receiver. Eventually, they will stop developing 32-bit receivers, and then everybody will end up in the same thing. We, of course, can do webcam redirection using the channels of Citrix. For those of you that have seen the race driving demo up there, the H.264 and the hardware acceleration is the key to actually achieve this kind of performance. And there is persons that would like to use Skype for Business, and they don't want to put the processing load on the server side. So of course we implement the HGX optimization pack, which enables peer-to-peer communication between endpoints. So you don't need to route all the traffic through your Citrix environment. It is only one checkbox. If you want to use optimization pack and you want to use cameras within session and whatever it might be, it's still only one checkbox. A lot of customers are enabling optimization pack and webcam redirection because they want to use webcams. It doesn't work. There will be a race condition in the receiver. And of course, make sure that server-side requirements are fulfilled. Because using optimization pack will require specific versions of Skype for Business on server side, and it will require some specific components and hotfixes and whatever it might be. Citrix has a really good documentation on this.